هسه بجيك أنا خلصت البيضة الواحد. أنت أخذت كم اللابتوب معك؟ الكروم بوك بس، في كمان ماك على هسه بجيبه. عندك 6 صفوف. موجود بالغرفة عندك.
اوكي
استنى شوي. على الطاولة هيك، في طاولة هيك بالنص، مفروض نص الصف. هي المفروض. ايوه وجه الملمس بالنص.
so bad.
Do it on the paper, you monkeys.
You're such a monkey.
Monkey.
Can you move this?
What do you think?
Nothing. She's like, are you going to the butcher shop? I was like, no, thank you. Oh my god, there's still a McDonald's straw on the paper. Flashing the paper from the straw.
This is so boring.
Did you find a bunch of McDonald's in your trash the other day?
I don't go through my trash.
Oh, okay.
I'll start though.
Yeah, no. Close it and shake it. You're actually going.
I got mentally. I think the only thing I'm like, okay, I
If anybody comes in here and has a problem, tell them that I said it was fine and they can call me on my phone if they have a question. And you guys just be back here respectful of the meeting when they are debating.
The dumbest set, bro, I swear. Oh my god, I went to 5:30 for it. To run. Disgusting.
Did you run?
I came to school at 6:30 to run, and I did it for an hour.
Awesome.
It's horrible.
I want
That was
to.
pretty good.
It was so cold.
Come on,
Oh my god, remember when I did track?
You remember I did track for 3 years?
Ew. Remember when I did track and I was so slow that the first people.
There's my phone number if anybody needs anything.
Sure.
Shusha.
Have fun.
Are you yogaing or tracking?
Coach Mohamed is doing forensic stuff, so I'm covering the gym for today and tomorrow. Come on. How you doing?
I'm not married.
This is wrong. 076. Right, is this wrong? 076.
07696.
Which company?
No.
It's saying it's 079.
Star 718. Okay. Wait, 7969.
My God, you have like a song
79.
number.
Yeah,
69.
You can
Yeah,
ask
nice.
email. What is a somebody Valley's phone number? Like, it just says shush and then she left.
Okay. Feeling for real.
What's the music? Oh, he, that's someone. She. What am I saying?
You're on speaker, by the way.
Oh, shit, it's a video. What? Where's it going? I wanna come. I wanna come.
When I got you.
Why is this guy so slow at walking?
He's here.
Oh, Lucy!
Ah.
Asshole.
Oh, come.
So shaky. How many tennis balls does he have?
Look. This is me. I love some. After that, every shot is a switch.
Help me! Help me! Daddy better make me go. Help me!
Why?
Someone goes to deep.
Okay, after that, everything else is a switch.
Sure.
That's a switch. This is also a switch.
Holy shit.
AG.
We pop out at your
Yeah.
party.
I was
I'm
going
with
back.
the game. And this gon' be a
Except
while.
you.
Look like a chain. I'm a killer girl, I'm sorry. But I can't say it. Coming for your body. Shots in the brain. We come from poverty, no, we ain't have a thing. It's a lot of animosity, but they won't say my name.
We have 15 minutes. To win the game, we have to go 1v1, right?
Yeah.
To win the game, it was 2-2. To win it,
Crow or something? I used to get shorter.
can't get to it.
No, I couldn't get.
I can't see myself. Oh, wait. You thought I was gonna go? Like, I went like this, so we keep spaced up, and then took a shot from the feet. And I hit it.
My stomach hurts.
Don't let him make me have it.
What the fuck is this pain? No, cause we want to go on. No, I'm telling you. That's pain.
Paint it on my skin, it's pretty white. No. It'll come off. No. My finger. Yeah, that's fucking insane. You didn't call him. You didn't call him.
I'm not calling it. You can go ahead.
Just don't do it. Just don't do it.
Just do the other one. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Frank. Let's do, how did that one?
I'm at least gonna do like a.
Wait, I got I think it's. That is so boring. I'm telling
Try it.
Okay.
Oh, hi.
Hi, you know that there's a forensics tournament starting in here in about 5 minutes.
Oh, 5 minutes? We'll try to music.
Well,
Because we thought it was
10
at-
minutes, you have 10 minutes.
Yeah, we thought it was at 30, so we're gonna.
You have 10 minutes, that's totally fine. So, yeah,
But
okay.
if we stay in paint,
Not during the thing. But you have 10 minutes. Those are amazing,
Thank you.
really amazing. Wow.
Call him.
I don't credit.
Tell him it's you.
You can sit back here.
No, you call him.
No.
You have to
No.
talk to him. Yeah, you have to talk to
You
him.
can sit, you can share.
I'm not taking- I'm not- It's your phone.
Hmm?
hung up.
Wow.
You talk to him? No, that's weird. You're not me too.
No, it's not.
We'll both talk.
No, it's not. I'm not gonna be like you.
You answer. Hi, it's us. Here. Well, put on speaker. You have to put on speaker.
Kara, I'm gonna run back down to the office. You wanna come with me or you wanna stay here?
No.
Stay home.
I was gonna see these calls. You call me at home.
This is 301. What happened with the family?
Just like keep it low, like punishment.
Oh my god, it's so different.
Okay, where's the timer?
No, no. Where is my timing? Okay, this is my time. Right here.
Do you guys like the walls?
What is that?
That's
That's the time.
that's ice that we made.
Why are they white?
Don't go too close.
One.
No, but just send her a message.
Write a note on the table.
Send her a message.
Are you crazy?
What?
My thing is use like beer. This is that.
Send her a message. Just like spear. He's probably gonna laugh at it.
I can send a shit summary to the whole HS store from this music. You know, I don't need them.
Okay, this makes me,
But for me, so I'm not worried about it at all.
Yeah, it's fine. No, that's it.
There's no sticky notes.
any sides? Okay, that's good to know.
Oh no, she's not debating. She's working with your mom.
Yeah, I'm gonna be in
It's
fine.
like-
She's her assistant.
I'm your mom's assistant. I'm not worried anymore. My mom's just the live stream. Didn't count the live stream. It's on camera.
Here, can you go? Can you go?
Where's the camera though? Is this the camera?
Mr. Madden?
Oh yeah, okay. There's one viewer, so it's cool.
Did they watch me do my hair?
Yeah.
Just maybe like a sticky note. Arnold always was to some people watching.
It's not gonna come. How am I supposed to?
heck is that?
Should I go to the girls' bathroom?
Watch yours. Oh my, he has so many eggs. It's so weird. Oh my god.
Who cares? It's one viewer.
See how this head's called? No.
Do you even know who I am?
Yeah, you're Katie.
Password. No. Why? It is. Your name.
Cake and egg.
Wait a minute. I'll leave him.
When did it go on here? Again,
Wow, that's a very interesting.
I can't say anywhere else.
Hi, it's Tyler. No.
He answered?
Oh no. Hi, it's Tyler and Miriam. Can you check me if you want to call back?
He's not gonna come back. He never
Call
does.
back, call back.
Hi, boyfriend.
Congratulations, you're no one cares.
Oh.
Drink water.
Sorry.
Hi, it's Khalid and Miriam. Miss Vaguely told us
Well, it makes sense. Like, how would we stay here? And this is the
that we can't pay. During
Here.
well, who's good?
What is that thing?
A ring. Not my ring.
Fat finger.
Yeah, I have huge fingers.
Does this fit your finger?
No. Get stuff after
Let me put it in my finger.
You know Arabic?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
So do I.
Really?
I think
paint is super warm. This every day, is the third time this week. I got rings on rings on rings because I said yes to the ring. My Dutch is married. That's a note for our teacher that's letting us paint this wall. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Here, yes, that was-
What is that?
Okay, the next one, no. Yeah. That's not really,
Who are the people that you're putting up there?
that's Tesla, that's.
I know him.
That's Newton, and that's Mercury.
Nice.
Just 3 hours.
Hi, Mr. Clean.
Welcome.
Can you?
Are you here?
Yeah.
Can we go over things?
This used to be Mr. Madden's room. Mr. Sorry, I thought this was the sister's room.
You're so offended.
We're gonna do a coin toss. So the one team will get this. Choose whether they go first or second or they.
I love all these already.
We are live.
You don't know her name.
As soon as they begin.
Alright. So here, I'll take the questions today. Somewhat.
I swear.
So I think
No.
we did 4-4-3.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know.
30 seconds stop.
Because like I was.
No,
like,
no,
my hand, that's my mom.
My mom was like, oh, keep that. That's not real. Oh, wait.
You know me for this.
She's 10.
Yeah, Maria.
How would you know
You got everything ready? Definitions are on my sheet.
She's like thinking about the question. Like,
Yep.
You were responsible for
definitions.
Good. And now.
Good. Can I pass you the paper?
Oh, just use my Spanish. I'll rip out paper. This is last year. This is like part of this term, some of last year's. Wow.
You would go from Canada.
We would go on a live event.
Wait a minute. You would go from
Should I still stand up?
Yeah.
No.
If I go to that side,
Yeah.
why? Because I. Do you want to face of the paper or will it be enough? One. That's me too.
Has, Aggie, has Mr.
My grandpa had all this.
B, what's his last name? Bowman, trained you that at time, they'll say time, but they'll stand 10 seconds later or not?
I'm like.
Has he trained you about what will happen?
He doesn't know how old he is. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All I say is save time.
They keep talking on my yard. Oh, is that Vector up there?
Good luck, guys.
This is a jumping fish.
Bye-bye.
Bye, good luck,
Did
guys.
you take Master's wallet?
Gossip Sabbath, right?
Sorry?
Gossip Sabbath. Heads or tails, yeah.
Oh.
Here in America, it's heads or tails.
Yeah.
Here in Jordan, Gossip Sabbath, times four. Sabbath, right?
That's so awesome.
Hello.
Welcome.
We just had a question. So we were wondering if, because the Wi-Fi is not allowed, but we were wondering if like we could use like Google Docs.
You can actually access them offline. Do you have a folder with all of your resources in one folder?
Yeah, but for like bookkeeping to like share notes.
Only if it's offline, you can't share.
Okay, no, it's
It has to be offline. So right now, if you can open up your laptops, I will need to see that they are
yeah.
offline. Oh, yeah, you need chairs. Don't be personal. Riverside doesn't get chairs, you have to stand. Show me the Wi-Fi. Show me yours. Awesome, thanks. Take your time.
Yeah.
This is such a cool chair.
I'm back. You're not gonna be able to sit there very much.
I know, but look at this, look at this.
It just keeps spinning.
No, no, no. When I pull down, I put my finger there, it starts in the middle, and then it goes out. Look, like that.
Questions on
So it's spiraling.
And you don't even move my finger,
That's interesting.
it moves it.
That's a good scientist or scientific question, isn't it?
It even goes on the metal. Right here. See?
tomorrow. I mean, the beats are become the,
Were you in the group last year?
yeah.
Was you about were you guys?
I knew you was sophomore.
freshman.
Yeah. Once you go beyond middle school, I don't know where you've gone. All right, you ready for you to look at your laptop?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm busy now.
I think you're
And mine, I did it last year.
Yeah, we can do the AC, no problem. All right. There you
Are you the only judge?
go. I am, I have all the power. Yeah, we turn on things.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, before I close the door, I do believe we start with a coin toss.
Yeah.
I guess I'll let the guests call it. Do you want heads or tails?
That's
I'm trying to toss it actually. Sure, it's heads. Do you want pro or con, or do you want first or second? Con. Con, okay. Do you guys want first or second?
First.
Let me just get set up and we'll begin. Lila, welcome back. Two.
Wait.
There's a folder in
I'll just take notes on the
Just close here and sit down.
So when you're up there, you don't have to.
Ready?
Who will be speaking first?
you know this week.
I know, but when you speak, like who will
Oh,
be first?
I'll be speaking.
Okay, and you are?
Akshan.
I'm Shani. Shani, yeah. And who will be speaking first over here? All right. Does she need to go sit back there? Back there? Nope. Here goes out. You may begin when you're ready.
We are here today to answer the following question. On balance, non-governmental organizations are more effective than governments at improving lives of disadvantaged people. It must be a firm resolution due to a multitude of reasons. The pretenses under which we debate are that NGOs or disadvantaged people are defined as those who have lived in substandard conditions due to poverty, lack of opportunities, hunger, physical/mental issues, unemployment, war, or other natural factors when compared to members of first world communities. Whereas NGOs would be defined as internationally operating groups that are specialized in the field of humanitarian aid and the alleviation of crises. They're the alleviation of crises that may lead to substandard conditions. Whereas we would also define effective as resolving the problem while ensuring maximization of resources, hence conserving effort and capital for future projects. The primary contention of this speech is that NGOs often have the capability to function in niche environments and are very rarely addressed by governments. Thereby, NGOs are tasked with a variety of orientations, amongst them the provision of services and resources, which accounts for approximately 41% of all NGOs, general development slash raising the living standards, which accounts for 48% of the NGOs, mobilization and consciousness raising, which accounts for 31% of the NGOs, promotion of self-reliance, which accounts for 21% of the NGOs, the lobbying and advocacy work, which accounts for approximately 10% of NGOs, empowerment opportunities accounts for another 10% of NGOs, whilst industrial experimentation accounts for the final 7% of NGOs, as reported by the UNRISD. Only two of these services are provided under the pretenses of typical governmental social contract, thereby enabling NGOs to address a multitude of niche issues that would otherwise ravage local minorities, thereby stifling development and ultimately mitigating growth of rural communities. Furthermore, the UNRISD affirms that NGOs, especially local development NGOs, are often seen as being agencies that are most committed to the goal of equitable development. Thereby, it is indicative that NGOs significantly improve the standards of living in impoverished populations in order to reinforce the development of society. Through providing an assortment of services to those in need in order to standardize the quality of life amongst national populations. Thereby, NGOs are crucial assets to nations. The second contention of this argument is that NGOs occasionally equip disadvantaged people with the tools they need to establish a sustainable lifestyle. The India Times reports that the American India Foundation's MASTER program has increased the Indian workforce by 45,000 individuals, many of which are underprivileged or abused young adults. Said NGO has successfully trained said individuals with the skills they need to perform tasks ranging from automotive maintenance to directing internal tools. On a related note, Kenya witnessed a 400% increase in NGO activity in recent years, whilst the quantity of registered NGOs in South Africa has surpassed 100,000, many of which are oriented towards the provision of education, social awareness. It is evident that education has become significant to modern development, as OECD's Chief of Staff Gabriela Ramos remarks that evidence shows that children at a disadvantage in the education system typically go on to receive smaller salaries and more worryingly evolve with smaller lives. To build more inclusive societies, every organization needs to step up its education efforts to help the poorer fulfill their promise of self-realization and have access to opportunities in life. And thus, NGOs have been proven to be targeting issues of great significance to society. The third contention is that NGOs are more versatile than their counterparts. The UNRISD affirms the statement. NGOs are significant service providers in the rural areas of Zimbabwe, operating both clinics and schools, and are typically development oriented.
Greetings, Honorable Judge. The Con respectfully accepts all the definitions presented by the Pro and would start by stating that the Pro, while mentioning the different compositions of NGOs, did not want, they mentioned the different compositions of NGOs and what the NGOs comprise of around the world, but they did not link this to their argument and provide a specific example as to why this statistic exactly proves that NGOs are more effective than governments at improving the lives of disadvantaged people. Secondly, they mentioned that NGOs have worked in alleviating people out of poverty and worked in bottom regions, but have not mentioned any specific issues whatsoever or given a specific example for these arguments, and therefore they're not able to provide any arguments to provide any examples towards their arguments. And now the CON would like to present its own argument that governments are more effective in handling disease prevention and eradication for the disadvantaged than NGOs. This can be seen in the CDC, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention's response to the West African Ebola outbreak. In the year 2014, the regions of Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia saw the outbreak of a virus epidemic called Ebola. In 2014, there were 18,000 cases of infection and 6,400 deaths in the three countries, according to a December 2014 UNDP report. However, the CDC, which is an American public health institute, activated its emergency operations in July to respond to the growing epidemic as it started to spread to other regions in Africa. During the course of the response, the CDC trained 24,655 healthcare workers in West Africa with over 24 state-of-the-art laboratories to contain the epidemic outbreak, according to an official 2014 to 2016 CDC report by the International Infection Control Team of the CDC. The CDC also worked in coordination with the Food and Drug Administration, a federal agency of the United States, to create the adenovirus type 5 Ebola vaccine in accordance to the same source as we mentioned previously. The impacts of the CDC's efforts were seen when the WHO, who placed the regions of Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea under public health emergency of international concern status, was lifted on the 29th of March 2016. Liberia was first declared Ebola-free in May 2015. Sierra Leone announced it was Ebola-free on March 7, 2016, and Guinea was finally declared Ebola-free in June 2016, according to the official March 29 WHO statement. Not only does this example show the extent to which the CDC, a public health institute run and funded by the government, was able to successfully contain what was known as one of the worst epidemics of the 21st century. However, they were more effective than NGOs in improving the lives of displaced and disadvantaged people in the Western African region. Due to a lack of economic stability, the rural and disadvantaged people of West Africa were not able to afford basic healthcare necessities to combat these diseases. An NGO cannot simply match with the resources, funding, and personnel that a government would have at their disposal, and is simply ineffective to compare a government with a non-governmental organization. The CON stated this example to prove the efficiency of how governments are better at containing disease outbreaks, and would like to come back on this rebuttal. That the pro has not been able to mention specific examples to their argument and are simply providing statistics, but are not able to link the statistics to their arguments. Thank you.
So by stating that the affirmative side did not suggest any evidence, how would you respond to the fact that also there has alleviated poverty for over 600,000 people by assisting other charities and other NGOs?
This was not brought up in the first pro speech, therefore we cannot testify to this argument. And if you would like to bring that up in the second speech, then we will have an opportunity about this. When was the article published? The article by the Indian Times published, given India's current status with the job recession, with India's unemployment being the lowest of all time?
In August 2019. Furthermore, you asked whether that you posed a statement that governments have addressed the areas that NGOs are more efficient at addressing, such as niche environments, such as the enhancement of mobilization and empowerment. How is that?
Could you please rephrase your question?
So you repeatedly stated that we have not made the synthesis between our evidence regarding specialization of NGOs. However, we do not agree that versatility is in the hand of NGOs wherein they could address multiple scenarios.
The call simply noted that the pro mentioned the composition of the different NGOs around the world, but we, in our opinion, believe that you were effectively able to link this to your and I'm not presenting an argument with this. Do you have any specific war-torn regions where NGOs have helped and alleviated people out of poverty?
This example we brought up shortly by our partner. However, in concert to that point, wouldn't you acknowledge the failure to mobilize the CBC prior to as many people perishing before the CBC has arrived, and thus the NGOs are more versatile?
Please restate it.
So are NGOs more versatile as many people have died before the CBC or governments have had time to intervene in the Ebola crisis?
The NGOs did not make any significant impact on the Ebola crisis, because if the NGOs did make a significant impact, you would see reports of that instead of CDC reports succeeding in preventing the Ebola outbreak. When was the UN report stating that stats published? When was the UN report published, and which NGOs were they talking to?
They had a general survey of all NGOs, and there was a select group of NGOs from worldwide, and this was produced in about 8 August 2019. Furthermore, you not in regards to your point on disease prevention, how do you respond to the fact that Bill and Melinda Gates provided the vast assortment of vaccinations in order to stifle the growth and spread of malaria?
Do you have any substantial evidence to prove that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation did prevent malaria as an epidemic? Because we have UNDP reports saying that the CDC did it to contain it without
My partner has bring it down.
Can we have those 1 to 30 seconds for us to?
You have 2 minutes throughout the time. You can request all of it. You can just part of it. And you do you want to request that?
Could we have 30 seconds? Everybody ready? The first contention of this argument is that NGOs are less hesitant regarding the implementation of new innovative methods of alleviating crises. The Digitalists reads that there is an approximate 12 million independent NGOs with both local and multinational stature. Furthermore, this source comments that said agencies often operate hand in hand with state governments on a variety of levels for the betterment of society. However, the Digitalist affirms that when NGOs take full advantage of innovative technology solutions, their impact increases greatly, as they can both improve their business operations and also how they deliver aid. Thereby, NGOs are striving to achieve optimal efficiency through the use of experimental technology superior to that of a developing nation's government. A prominent example of such would be Don Solidaris, which is dedicated to helping over 300 charities order basic necessities for the nearly 600,000 people they serve through the donation of excess non-food goods. Don Solidaris offers this service through an automated online catalog and inventory system. This technology has helped them increase their efforts threefold while maintaining a minimum number of employees and volunteers. The American Red Cross's efforts to maximize its donations fund by reducing the internal processing time of its expense management system. This allows the agency to focus more on front-end business process and ultimately the organization's constituents. Moreover, tech journalist Dante Ricci affirms that with technologies like mobile tracking, mapping, data analytics, and the cloud, NGOs can zero in on the needs of the people they serve more efficiently, and even help prevent crises and find their underlying causes with time. So the data would become vital to national governments worldwide. Hence, data collection would become one of the primary functions of an NGO, and ultimately prove to be vital in the process of alleviating conflicts, thereby distinguishing an NGO from developing governments. The opposing side mentioned the CDC and the FDA and the agencies of the United States government and what their role was in helping the Ebola outbreak and helping prevent it and contain it. When the United States government and its agencies are part of a third world nation and government, meaning that they will have the resources and the supplies to effectively deal with this situation, when the nations that these situations arise in were third world nations which were unable to provide aid to the people and help them with this epidemic, showing that in fact governments were ineffective at helping disadvantaged people in this case because the governments of those countries couldn't support their own population and needed the help of another government. Another point is that the majority of the world is composed of third world nations, not first world nations, showing that the majority of the world's governments will in fact need outside help to deal with epidemics and diseases such as the Ebola outbreak and many other situations. All right, thank you.
Can we have 30 seconds?
30 seconds? Sure.
So one of the examples mentioned by the pro was Don Saladares. The pro was not able to provide any substantial statistics on the impact that the Don Saladares had had. And even when they did not provide any corroborating sources or where exactly they got this information from, such as the source, the website in which they had gotten this information from, or the date in which these documents were published. They have also not provided if this technology had actually reached the disadvantaged people and the impact in specific, like the specific impact that they had made on these people. They also brought up the Red Cross, which is a crisis which aids countries in crisis and has nothing to do with technology. Hence the con was slightly confused as to why this NGO was brought up in this argument. The pro had mentioned that the United States of America helped a country that was not able to support the CDC, that was not able to help the Ebola crisis, when the contention that the con is trying to make is that governments are effective at improving the lives of disadvantaged people, regardless of which government it is. We are trying to prove that governments, even in unison, are able to effectively improve the lives. No NGOs in the Ebola crisis were able to fix or come up with a solution for all the disadvantaged people who were dying due to the Ebola crisis. But governments in unison were able to do this. To prove this point further, we bring up our next point, that governments in partnership can work together to aid disadvantaged people in terms of economic fruition and the alleviation of poverty, leading to the better access of healthcare and infrastructure. The Lao PDR is now a lower middle income country, and poverty has declined in the recent years. This success can be accredited to the Poverty Reduction Fund, aka the PRF, which was established to fight poverty at the grassroots level. It was designed to improve access to village infrastructure and healthcare services and access to empower villagers to manage their own project planning and implementation. The current PRF project is primarily financed by the Swiss Agency for Development Corporation, which is an office-level agency in the Federal Administration of Switzerland and a part of the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs, creating in support of the Swiss Constitution, which states that Switzerland must contribute to the alleviation of hardship and poverty in the world. As of April 2019, according to a 2019 World Bank report, the PRF has achieved the following. Monthly household income has increased from 75,000 LAK in 2012 to 450,000 LAK in 2017, and then to 650,000 LAK in the early 2018. There has been a 36% increase in the number of households with the access to healthcare services and a 45% increase in those with access to improved educational facilities during the first 2 years. There has been a 48% increase in the number of households with overall access to all weather roads during the first 2 years. And more than 1,200 sub-projects were completed in the 42 poorest districts in Lao PDR including schools, rural roads, water supply, irrigation, and 92 of complete projects were rated as being of high technical quality by the World Bank. This thus proves that MEDC countries, in cooperation with LEDC countries, can come together to help disadvantaged people globally. This proves our contention, claiming that governments in unison can help disadvantaged people around the world. The Pro has failed to mention any real NGOs except for the Dawn Solidaris that have actually been able to make a difference in the lives of disadvantaged people. And even in the example of Dawn Solidaris, they have not been able to provide any substantial evidence proving that the technology had reached the disadvantaged people, thus nullifying this claim and proving the examples mentioned by the Thank you.
We have 30 seconds. Administrative system.
I believe it's time for a crossfire now.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, crossfire first between two of you, yes, and then summary.
So you mentioned that the Dawn Solidaris group hadn't delivered this technology, but in fact, this technology wasn't delivered to these people. It was an administrative system that helped the group, that helped the NGO Dawn Solidaris do its work and to manage its NGO. How does the con respond to that?
This wasn't mentioned in the speech, and we were wondering as to what the NGO itself had done in the country, and if this was an administration task force, we had not understood that in the speech. So we were wondering what their sources were for the statistics talked about the Dawn Solidaris, any corroborating sources to prove the statistics.
My partner will bring that up in the next speech. So you mentioned how governments are in partnership to alleviate economic distress and economic issues in other countries. But as we have seen, there is a trade war, there are multiple trade wars happening, such as between the United States and China, which would actually prevent governments from working together and helping to alleviate crises, but making them worse because of the increase of prices due to this trade war and because of the implications of the trade war. How does Congress?
We don't believe that the trade war holds any relevance to this due to the fact that the United States of America and any other MEDC has a section of their economy split apart for helping disadvantaged countries. This is a part of the Bill of Rights, and this is part of the United States Constitution. Similarly to the Swiss Constitution to help lower economically developed countries, and hence we don't believe that any external war or conflicts will come in between this. Do you have how does the Pro respond to the fact that India is now facing its highest unemployment rates and we are facing a job recession, and yet there was statistics mentioned to prove that there are lots of jobs being provided?
This source was clearly from a different time period than what is currently going on, showing that in those specific years in which the contention that my partner brought up took place was in a time when it did show that NGOs were in fact effective at alleviating the crises of disadvantaged people and actually helping improve the lives of disadvantaged people. And you mentioned a point about income and equality, when in fact income is not equal to equality because the money tends to stay at the richest parts of society and at the higher classes. So how would Khan respond to that when in fact these two things There is no correlation between them, nullifying this point.
The con had never mentioned any correlation between them, but we are happy to prove so. The PRF was created in attempts to establish and empower the villagers of the Lao PDR. Can I finish my sentence? Empower them economically. This allows them to be at an equal standpoint in society to the richest of the country. And since there isn't a very high disparity between the rich and poor in Lao PDR, since predominantly the entire country is at a lower middle income, we don't believe that and the question has any relevance to the example provided.
How many other seconds left? 30 seconds. We are in the summary stage. In summary, the opposing argument, our argument stands as the concept is really failed to negate it. Thereby, they've stated blatant points such as the fact that income increase is always results with the alleviation of poverty, whereas equity is not taken into consideration, and equity is the primary indicator of societal alleviation. Furthermore, they also negated the fact that the trade war is detrimental to the economies of societies, which directly contradicts their point about governments joining to engaging in joint enterprises for the betterment of society. And thus their point does not stand because they negate it because the trade war exists and that proves to the detriment of society. Furthermore, all the governments they have mentioned are first world governments, and there's only a limited number of those, and they are only so physically limited. And a disadvantaged person in said communities or in said first world government that falls under first world governments is far less disadvantaged than any person who lives under a third world government. And therefore, their point does not stand in all cases. And as we see, the rule is not dictated by a bunch of outliers and a lack of statistical majority. Furthermore, they brought points about the Donso. They question the credibility of Donso theirs, whereas these facts may be vetted by the digitalists and may be received by the Donso theirs themselves. And they failed to acknowledge that administrative systems really do help the efficiency of NGOs, and thereby allowing the NGOs to achieve more work in less time with less effort. And thus, our argument stands as they have failed to negate it. Thank you.
Can we have 30 seconds? Okay, in the starting, the pro briefly mentioned the UN report, but not which body the UN report, or which body was the UN report written by, and or which UN report was it exactly. And secondly, they gave statistics from a different time period and stated that in this time period, NGOs were more effective. Is the pro saying that in the past, NGOs have been more effective and that they are no longer effective anymore because of this exact quote that in this time period, NGOs were more effective, giving statistics from something that happened in the past? Secondly, the pro attacked upon our example, saying that it's not an example of equity. However, the Lao PDR example shows specifically that how the income in households were raised to an equal level, and and they were raised to a level where it could benefit each and every person. Isn't this a perfect example of equity? Isn't raising income showing exactly showing equity? Secondly, we believe that the trade war has no correlation with this argument whatsoever, because every MEDC has set aside a fund to help aside LEDCs, because that is enshrined upon their constitution. So regardless of the United States' relation with other countries, it is their duty to help LEDCs. The con believes that we have been able to effectively present arguments of why governments are better at NGOs improving the lives, because our examples show tangible impacts that of the actions that the governments have taken with reliable statistics and sources. The pro have time and time again failed to bring up any of these statistics, as they mentioned in the crossfire that they will bring that the partner will bring up the source, but they failed to bring up the source in his speech. And we believe that our sources, our evidence, are able to help build our argument, and that we have effectively been able to prove this resolution wrong, and that governments are in fact more effective than non-governmental organizations at improving the lives of disadvantaged people. Thank you.
You can turn and face each other if you'd like to, or you can just talk out to us.
In the first half of the speech, the delegate, sorry, I just been on the MEDC conference, so the opposition brought up the point that equity is being raised in general households. They failed to recognize the source for an equity indicator, whereas they only cited the increase of general income. Is there any such source about the increase of equity, or is it simply regarding the income?
The simple statistics provided by the 2019 World Bank report, the Poverty Reduction Fund, as the name of the report states, is enough. The statistics are enough to be able to build a case around the fact that if we see a statistic where income is increasing in the households, that is enough to provide a clear-cut example of equity in these government's actions providing equity. What is the source specifically that we are? What is the source for the impacts of the Don Solidaris' actions?
As we stated earlier, it was reported by Don Solidaris itself and was vetted by the digitals. Vetted by the digitals. Okay. In consequence of that point, various renowned sources such as the CIA World Factbook and the World Bank have stated that in recent years equity is plummeting. Yet, even despite a 25 times increase in the economy since 1970, how may you respond to that increase in revenue but lack in equity?
This
So, in recent years, prominent sources such as the World Bank and CIA World Factbook have shown the economy has increased by over 25 times. And yet equity has fallen in recent years, and there's a greater degree of class separation.
The pro is trying to force upon this concept of equity and the raising of household income. When this example was put out by the con to prove that governments are effectively able to raise household income, raise the access to healthcare, raise the access to education in underdeveloped countries. We have tried to prove that there is, a direct correlation between raising income and providing equity. We don't see what value that this holds to our argument, proving that the PRF was able to do what I had said. So how can, do you have any statistics that prove the effectiveness, like specifically prove how the Don Solidaris was able to actually help people of any specific country?
It is a French NGO, and thus has helped people in various ex-French colonies, thereby, over 600. It's health NGO. It is the It is a larger conglomeration of NGOs. It has helped over 300 charities, which in turn have helped people in ex-French colonies in Africa. Thereby, as a returning question, how do you Okay, great.
Could we have the remaining 30 seconds?
Yep.
Everybody ready? Pro believes that we have won this debate because Khan has failed to fully discredit our point on Don Solidaris and discredit that it has in fact helped multiple people. And the argument of the opposing side is built mainly on the fact of trickle-down economics, in which when there is more money, it trickles down throughout all the different social classes, when in fact this isn't a reality, and the money tends to stay at the top, showing that the poorer people, who are generally more disadvantaged, don't have their lives getting improved by governments, or by the governments, or by the help of, or from the help of governments. And the opposing side failed to mention any other examples of governments being effective at providing aid and improving the lives of disadvantaged people, other than the Ebola crises, which shows that they have insufficient evidence to prove their case. When we have provided more than one example of when NGOs have been effective at improving the lives of disadvantaged people, showing that our argument still stands. Thank you.
Can we have a?
We have
1 minute left.
How much was the do again?
Sorry, what was that name?
How much was the do again?
0.
Well,
Time and time again, the Pro has been throwing claims of the successes of NGOs, and even upon questioning, they have not been able to provide how these NGOs, specifically the Don Solidaris, were successful in their countries. Simply stating that this helped ex-French colonized states does not tell us how many people in these states, how they were disadvantaged, or which countries. The French had colonized many states, and we still don't know which ones the Don Solidaris had targeted. Furthermore, there was no credibility for what the digitalist is, and hence the corroboration of this source, on their statistics, nullifies their claim. They've also not provided any evidence of the impacts of the Don Solidaris. Telling us where it is on a general basis is simply not enough. The statistics provided by the 2019 World Bank report on the PRF prove that the people in the lower sector of the economic hierarchy were the ones that were benefited. The Lao PDR is a country that has a lower middle income per capita generally, there is no such thing as rich people in the Lao PDR. And the ones that were benefited were the people of the lower economic hierarchy. Hence, the concept of trickle-down economics is nullified in this case. We have provided 2 examples of the CDC, wherein disease prevention had flourished and people who were dying from the Ebola crisis were able to be saved due to the intervention of the United States of America. And the Lao PDR, PRF, in which economic prosperity, wherein the people were able to have access to healthcare, access to education, and access to a shot at life. They have only provided one weak argument wherein the impact was not proven. Hence, we believe that every argument provided by the con has been successful, and we have nullified the one and singular claim provided by the pro. The other general NGOs mentioned by the pro are simply not enough. We need real statistics of real people that were benefited.
Thank you. Right now, shake each other's hand. You have about half an hour until the next round starts. It's okay for you. You want to, it's okay. It's okay.
I feel like I was in the economics class.
Yeah, me too. I was like, whoa.
Of course. Good debate, guys.
I'm gonna ask questions like going from the
I would probably answer those because of the last conference we went to, I was chairing. So I probably would have spread out into
Which committee?
historical security.
Oh, actually,
I love
I just
What was the agenda?
So there was a question of the question of
Right here.
1991,
Classroom, I don't know what you're.
something about Soviet bloc nations, and something about the Congo.
I don't know. I guess I should.
I'm in a sophomore.
Freshman is yeah.
Yeah, we're 10.
Okay.
All right, cool. See you all in the
Bye-bye.
finals.
See you guys.
Next year, finals. Thank you, Josh. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Thank you.
I need to make the sources more elaborate.
No, you didn't. You stated that it was multiple times.
It's okay.
You need to like
I think
provide.
that we should think about the tactic.
No, I know exactly what I'm gonna do for my. I'm not gonna say it because my vlog's been going on now, but.
Yeah, you don't want to do
Tactics
it
are
in
really
live
good,
stream.
though. We have no tactics.
Right, well,
Oh, they have pretty good tactics for con. For pro, tactics not for like the same tactics on con. But for con, negating the
Getting the opposition's
evidence.
entire argument itself.
Yeah.
So Hill, don't forget your stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Just no.
Keep the questions paper because obvious reasons. What? Obvious reasons and for future use. Oh, yeah. We just had a pretty good one. It can go either way.
I would beg to differ.
Okay.
They had a pretty good one. We didn't.
He moved back down on the ground floor in front of Mary's office. Remember when we were with- You go down this way, you go down that way. Either way.
Matthew?